Hello, and welcome to a special edition of KJH Insights. I'm Sarah Bull, partner and portfolio manager at KJ Harrison Investors, and I'm so pleased to be hosting today's conversation. Those of you who tune in regularly know that we typically dive into the markets with our CEO, Joel Clark, where we share insights on how we're navigating the financial landscape for our clients. Today, we're shifting gears and focusing on how women are reshaping the family dynamics of wealth, a trend that's both important and accelerating. With me today are two phenomenal guests, Kate Powell, President and Estate Planning Advisor at Powell Insurance, and Ali Spinner, Partner of Tax and Estate Planning at Crowe Soberman. Kate and Ali, welcome and thank you for joining us.
So great to be here.
Happy to be here, Sarah. Thanks.
Yeah, well, thank you both. I'm excited for this conversation. So let's begin with the broader landscape. Women today are not only earning more wealth, but they're also inheriting and managing more of it. In fact, as you both know, many financial institutions are projecting that women in Canada will control more than $4 trillion in financial assets by 2028, which is a great number. So, as we've talked about, the three of us in previous conversations, it's no longer really a question of if women will lead financially, but how. And both of you, like me, have been advising high net worth individuals and families for over 2 decades. I hope that's okay that I've just let that cat out of the bag. So, based on that, how are you seeing women engaging with wealth today? And are you seeing a difference based on all of that research? Kate, maybe start with you. How would you describe kind of the historical role of women that women have played? And what are you seeing that's changed in terms of how women are being involved in the conversations around their legacies?
Absolutely. What I've experienced is when we sit down with women, they tend to think about things holistically and more from the human dynamic side. So when they think about their estate plan, they're asking questions like, how will this impact my family? How will so and so feel about this plan if it plays out, or when it plays out, I should say? How will this plan achieve my goals for my children? Often when we sit down with men, it's a very different approach. Men will take a more concentrated, fixed approach, more focused on the numbers right out of the gate.
I think that's absolutely true. And I notice that too in my practice, that women really are quite different from men in terms of how they approach wealth. And there seems to be a greater focus on the full financial picture, values, family goals, sustainability, versus just performance and returns. I completely agree with you, Kate. So, Ali, in your tax practice, do you tend to see the same?
I do. I absolutely do see the same. Although I am a tax practitioner and accountant, I still absolutely do take a holistic view. But to echo what you both mentioned, I do believe that in my experience, men do tend to focus on the bottom line, the dollars and cents. What's this going to mean? Although they still are considering what it's going to mean for their family and for themselves, they want to know what the bottom line is going to be right away. And I do agree with women. The bottom line is important because, of course, they have to provide for their family and want to make sure that everyone's okay. It's just that in getting to the bottom line, they do take a step back and think about a lot of other factors, whether I would call it soft factors, not that they're not important, but perhaps more emotional factors that go into the decision, being more broad. How is this going to feel? What's this going to mean? Is this something that I can live with? Does this feel good to me? As opposed to strictly just what the bottom line answer is going to be.
Yeah. And how does the role of that emotional intelligence that we've just all discussed, what role does that play in the effective wealth transfer? And are women using that emotional intelligence to leverage that and navigate family dynamics? Ali, do you want to continue on that emotional intelligence theme?
Sure. I think the term emotional intelligence is a great term to use here. And I know we're speaking in some generalized terms and certainly not meaning to say that one gender is more emotionally intelligent than the other. But I do think that both types will come to the decisions differently and from a different perspective. And the key is that I do find that women will take a step back. they will use their EQ to help them guide decision making within the wealth management and tax planning world. Of course, I'm not a wealth manager, but in my day-to-day, I'm involved in many discussions that clients have with their wealth management teams. And certainly it's a much broader discussion. I find with women, they come to it on a more slow basis. And when I say slow, they meaning that they likely ask more questions around items that men generally might not ask. Again, it's not good, it's not bad, it's just different. But I think in the same vein, if someone didn't ask those questions as advisors, we'd be sure to, point them out and have items that they should be considering. But I do find that in my discussions with women and being an advisor to women, it's sometimes easier to have those discussions with women because they are often more open to it. They're less afraid of having that discussion. For example, it could be a discussion around, how family law is going to affect a certain structure, or what the impact of certain investments are going to be from a sustainability point of view. Or it could be about discussions that they might have to have with other family members with respect to planning opportunities and ideas. And because I do find that women are more open to these types of discussions, I do find that it's a conversation that happens with more fluidity, it's more natural, and there's certainly less nervousness around having that discussion there.
Yeah, no, I know, I agree. It's almost like women are the natural communicators or bridge builders, or even that they have the social capital to navigate all of those topics you just described.
Yeah, I totally agree.
So, Kate, can you share an example of how female family members have successfully introduced these inclusive conversations in your experience?
Absolutely. One example that comes to mind is we've tried for many years to have the spouses of our clients attend meetings, and we are gaining some traction, but I would certainly say in the more mature generation, it's not yet an all the time type of thing. When spouses of the more mature generation, who tend to be females, but not all the time, do come to meetings and talk about their family's estate plan, as Ali mentioned earlier, it really broadens the horizon of the conversation. It goes from exclusively being focused on tax planning and IRRs to what would our children want? How will this impact them? And really getting ahead of some what may be small, insignificant issues now, but that if ignored over the medium and long term could become more material, contentious issues. So it's just setting the stage and opening the door for really productive and important family conversations that yield so much fruit down the line. And so it really enriches the planning and I think solidifies the planning and the family and their own social capital and their own relationships for a long time to come.
Kate, I love that you mentioned setting the stage, where when women are part of meetings, they will help set the stage.
Absolutely.
One example that I'd love to give, I had a wonderful opportunity to sit in on some conversations that a family was having that was led by a governance consultant who was working with the family to understand the family values, how the family was going to address wealth within the family, pass wealth down within generations. And one of the most amazing things at that meeting, and really left an impression on me, was where the mom of the family, she did stand up and set the stage at the beginning of the discussion, reminding the family, reminding the children that this all really came back to family values and family objectives. And it was a beautiful way that it set the stage for the rest of the discussion throughout the rest of the day,
Mhm.
and that the mom was able to impart her wisdom over what her and her husband had worked so hard to instill into their children by way of values. And it really helped guide the discussion along. And in that specific situation, I can certainly guarantee that if mom hadn't been at the meeting, that setting the stage and discussing of family values to bring all of the points that came up through the day back to that would not have occurred. So it was a very welcome addition to the discussion.
And that's great, Ali. And I'd love to delve a little deeper on that. How did she lead in that example? So we're talking here about value-based leadership, which, as you said, is so important in terms of intergenerational planning and legacy. Did she lead with storytelling, or what did she do to foster that deeper conversation?
That's a great question. She led with really outlining the family's values. And the family's values included taking care of one another, looking out for one another, but also taking care of and looking out for the community on a larger basis. And really highlighting some of the philanthropic work that the family had done in certain areas within the community that they were committed to and wanted to continue to be committed to. But they also, when they discussed taking care of one another and their family values, she was really stressing the virtues that her and her husband had strived to instill within the children and wanted to see continue along. Of course, no guarantee that the kids are going to necessarily ascribe to the same values, but at least if we're discussing it with children, discussing it with family, and making it known that these are our hopes and dreams and what we would continue to see follow along in the family, you certainly have a better shot.
Yeah, and I guess it certainly helps build generational confidence and competence in financial stewardship.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Kate, what are you seeing in terms of families and success with a more inclusive values based leadership model?
Well, a couple things. The first is when a female spouse in the older generation starts attending meetings with us, she gains confidence because these tend to be really smart women. They just haven't been involved in the conversation in the past. But once they do get involved and they say their piece that's important to them up front, that may be more related to values and social capital, they'll be listening to the more technical and numbers-based pieces of the conversation and start to understand how that works and gain confidence to be involved on a regular basis going forward. The other thing we see is that when adult children or, folks in their late teens who are at a maturity level that it's appropriate for them to start attending meetings and being part of it, is that they find their voice early and gain confidence to ask questions when they don't understand things, think critically, which is really empowering and again will pay so many dividends for them down the line as they mature and have to take on increasing responsibility. Get involved in some way, shape, or form, and you'll be surprised at the comfort level you gain, the speed at which you gain that comfort, and confidence to start becoming proactive, going deeper, learning more, participating more. And the second thing I'd say is we work with lots of female clients now who are the primary breadwinner, who are entrepreneurs. And in some ways, we've got the opposite problem where we've got to say, should your spouse or husband be attending these meetings? Have you chatted with him about it? How does he feel? And that's refreshing. And that extends to taking a collaborative approach with your advisory team. I find that our clients gain a lot when they connect their advisory team and have everybody share their opinion on their own area of expertise and ensure that the plan works well collectively together. It really enhances the results.
I have the same experience where, again, women are really taking the lead. So we've covered a lot today just on how women, the changing dynamic of women in families and how they're really shaping conversations around wealth and ways for those women that don't feel like they are quite financially literate yet, ways for them to get involved. Allie, do you have any last minute nuggets for our audience before we wrap up here?
I think a great last minute nugget would be, as Kate mentioned, it's never too late. Even attending meetings, starting to listen to the language, understanding the flow, understanding the type of questions that are asked of you, the client, is important. That can happen at any time. Even though it perhaps may take a while for some education when it comes to learning about life insurance, wealth planning, tax planning, it's never too late to start.
So, Kate and Allie, thank you both so much. This has been such a thoughtful and practical conversation, and I think we've sparked some really valuable takeaways. Most importantly, that women have the power and the perspective and position to lead when it comes to family wealth. So, for our listeners, we hope this episode resonated with you, and we'd love to keep the conversation going. So, follow each of us on LinkedIn, and we'll continue to post articles on women and wealth. Thanks very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
This podcast is produced solely for informational purposes and is not to be construed as an offer to sell or the solicitation of an offer to buy a security. The information herein is based on sources we believe to be reliable but is not guaranteed by us and does not purport to be a complete statement or summary of the available data. Any opinions expressed herein are statements of our judgment on the recording date and are subject to change without notice. Any unauthorized use or disclosure is prohibited. Receipt and/or review of this presentation constitutes your agreement not to reproduce, display, modify, distribute, transmit, or disclose to others the content, opinions, conclusions, or information contained in this podcast.